Hi everyone. Welcome to this webinar. This is Lakshmi Sharma. I'm Head of Professional Services at OLOID, and I'm thrilled to moderate today's session. Did you know that 1.8 billion people work today across the world? They work today in frontline roles, from retail point of sales to manufacturing to healthcare, nurses and doctors, and more. Each of these workers spend a significant portion of their shift just logging into various systems. And that can span anywhere from 10 to 20 times per shift to 60 to 70 times depending on the role you're performing. And some examples would be you're just logging into your devices, right? Devices like Zebra devices, point of sale systems in retail, and special purpose IoT systems that are just built in manufacturing, and physical access control system just to get you into the building or into the premise where you're going to work. And more trend is, especially because of digital transformation that has happened, are enterprise apps that have become just the daily part of your work as a frontline worker. And one of such applications is Workday, where your workers are just checking their daily schedule, clock in, clock out. They review their vacation balances. They apply for vacation, and just kind of and sometimes just for internal job transfer. Very common. They're just some of the examples where your frontline workers are just interacting with variety of these systems, leading to sometimes just sharing their leading to some practices where they may end up sharing the passwords for the shared devices because they don't typically have email addresses. They don't have typically company provided phones. So at OLOID, we are modernizing identity and access with a focus on simplifying and securing this exact authentication experience for frontline workers. One of the ways we achieve this is by modernizing time tracking system, offering a hardware agnostic solution with a full suite of compliance features, and that dramatically reduces the time spent by these frontline workers as well as HR and payroll teams outside of the frontline workers, because they're the one who are managing these time clocks and these examples of I explain, like whether it is vacation, whether it is job transfers. So today, we will explore this journey of how OLOID has been transforming time clock and addressing the simplification and security of authentication, and with an example of how we have integrated that with Workday. And in that journey, we have two guests, SRS, who's one of our early customers who implemented OLOID's time tracking system and integrated with Workday for their frontline workers, and a product leader from our partner Workday. And we both, whether it is Workday as a partner and SR as a customer, collectively as a team, we have been collaborating to enhance the experience for these frontline workers and improve their lives, and also improve the security to the next level. So I'm pleased to introduce Kiran Jalakam, who's the Senior Director of HR Systems and Payroll at SRS Distribution, who will share SRS transformation journey with us, and Andrew Gossett, the Senior Director of Product Management at Workday, who will provide an industry perspective and explain how Workday and OLOID partner to help organizations such as SRS. So before we get into the panel discussion, I would like to start by getting a feel of, via a quick poll of how many of you have used a time tracking system or have used Workday or are looking at solving problems for frontline workers. So please take a few minutes to take a poll. Okay. Can we check the poll result, please? Okay, great. Wow, that's wonderful. So so almost all of you have, uh, you know, you have either used time tracking systems or looking at compliance. So this is wonderful. So, so now our guests will have an idea of where to kind of, address your questions. And by the way, as we go along the panel, this is like a joint panel. So we do have like, of course, like it's a panel. So we do have some specific questions, but feel free to ask questions in the question Q&A format. And also towards the end, we'll give you an opportunity to do that. So I'll start with Kiran. Kiran, let's start with you. Can you please give a quick overview of your role and the scale of operations at SRS to our audience?
Absolutely. Good day, everyone, and Lakshmi, thank you and the OLOID team for having me here. I'm Kiran Jalakam. I am the Senior Director of HR Systems and Payroll at SRS in Heritage Family of Companies. I lead the strategic HR tech initiatives and payroll teams that support our workforce and the business operations across the country. As you guys might know, SRS is one of the largest and fastest growing building product distributors in the United States. We have more than 760 locations nationwide, serving contractors in roofing, landscaping, and pool supply business. What really sets us apart is our entrepreneurial culture. Like we say, our mission is make money, have fun, and give back. And from HR perspective, we had a phenomenal year. Our CHRO, Carrie David, was named one of the top 100 HR professionals globally by the 2025 Icon Awards. And just as exciting for our HR team as well, we were recognized as one of the top 100 HR teams worldwide by our impact, innovation, and leadership. On top of that, we earned the Campus Forward Award for our forward-thinking approach to recruiting and internships. And of course, the big milestone for us, SRS is now part of the Home Depot family through an $18 billion acquisition. It's an exciting chapter that's helping us scale while staying true to our leadership and values. And I'm looking forward to learning from this group and sharing how we are aligning our HR systems with the business strategy to drive our growth and transformation.
Wow, that's an impressive scale. And thank you for mentioning the broader family you're part of, and congratulations of your recent acquisition and the growth too. So look forward to hearing more. So what do you see as the top workforce challenge facing distribution companies today, especially when it comes to Frontline and the mobile employees, Kiran?
Yeah, honestly, I've been struggling with this battle for ages now, and that's why I'm going to say that's a great question from you, Lakshmi. One of the top challenges we see at SRS and Heritage Group of Companies is keeping the frontline and the mobile employees engaged and connected. If you think about that, these teams, they're spread across hundreds of locations, often without regular access to desktops or corporate systems. To address this, we invested in mobile-friendly HR platforms like Workday and OLOID that allow our associates to access pay, time entry, benefits, training from their phones anytime, anywhere. Mm-hmm. Another challenge is career visibility. Frontline workers can see sometimes they're hitting the dead end. So we're working on clearer internal mobility programs for using data to proactively surface growth opportunities to them, internal portals and whatnot. Mm-hmm. To just give you a recent example, we launched a targeted development programs that help warehouse associates move into leadership or sales roles. And we always culturally had what we called as the Driving Academy, where we bring in the top performers through getting their CDL license and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And no conversation is complete without having a topic of AI and automation, right? So looking ahead, I think AI and automation will reshape how we support our workforce. At SRS, we're already exploring AI-driven tools to personalize learning, streamline HR service delivery. But with that comes the need to ask for reskilling the employees and the change management, especially for the mobile teams who may be less exposed to the technology, unlike the corporate workforce.
Mhm. Sorry, go
I was
ahead.
going to summarize by saying ultimately it's about creating that connected, empowered, and future-ready workforce, no matter where they are. Meet them where they are.
Mm-hmm. Just for I've heard it so many times for our audiences too. I think one thing which I've seen with SRS and with you, kind of, even your problem statement was around, hey, it was genuinely around simplification. Like, we want their life to be simple. We want to be where they are. You truly, genuinely kind of use the statement that we use for our customers. Hey, we want to meet the customers where they are. And that's what you did. Kind of giving statement, I still kind of, remember like, hey, make the system so foolproof that even if there are certain mistakes in typing and editing, those are kind of taken care of. So congratulations to entire SRS leadership for a focus on employee growth, including the frontline workers. So congratulations. This is really amazing. So I
Thank
had
you.
to mention that. And so over to you, Andrew. From the Workday side, what trends are you seeing across your customers that align with what just Kiran has mentioned?
I think retention and labor cost are top of mind for everybody in the frontline workspace. When we're looking at this with customers to help jointly solve their problems, it's how do you keep the people you have for a little bit longer and then show them internal career paths rather than all career opportunity being external to the company. There's a lot of competition and it's kind of unsustainable to compete on the hourly rate alone. So you have to give them more of the what's in it for me to connect to the worker and drive additional retention factors so that they feel belonging. Really, after you take care of kind of the operational basics and you do things like, align your schedules to public transportation schedules so they can get to work, offer some flexibility for caregiving responsibilities at home, whatever that might mean. And then you give them mentoring internally and the opportunity to grow. The worker feels like you're investing in them, and then you become a better place to work overall. Part of that's putting it into one system, eliminating the number of logins, the barriers and the friction there, and then offering enough of what they have to do along with your employer value proposition for the things that drive the retention. And then we see that the companies we work with are really able to retain their workers, but also get visibility into the labor cost, control that more proactively, and understand what they're spending in different areas. And so that's something when we partner with customers, we focus on helping them get control of, but also just getting the basic visibility to do that. And then the workers benefit from it as well.
Awesome. So kind of, I love that example where you mentioned you also align to like some giving options to even align to transportation schedule and going to that extent, because that's a daily life challenge that these workers kind of deal with. And also giving visibility, like thinking about organization, giving visibility, kind of you're covering the whole spectrum. That makes total sense. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank
And yeah, so Kiran, back to you. So given the challenges or the discussions we had about retention, about visibility, and then and how to kind of keep growing that talent across so what is technology like specifically login and authentication and time clock and attendance, right? So how do they help in distribution? Where does it, what are the opportunities, let's say, or where do they still fall short for as they exist, right? For HR and ops teams.
So if you think about it, like I mentioned earlier, frontline communication and frontline focus has been on the back burner. I've been part of Workday ecosystem, and prior to that with PeopleSoft, big fan of David Duffield and what Anil had to do now under Carl's leadership. And I see the focus now on the frontline, but that speaks for how antiquated the systems and thinking and the focus on frontline has been historically.
Mm-hmm.
In the past couple of years, I'm seeing a huge transformation. And at SRS, we talk so much about how the frontline workers are our primary focus in how they are an integral part of our growth story, and we want to take care of them. So now we are seeing all these tools, including Workday, that has so much focus on the communications and making the frontline easy. And of course, OLOID also falls on the same realm. And one of the reasons why we had to look at the spectrum of tools that are available in the market, where you don't make it intensive on them or throw a bunch of tech and systems on them, and make it simple enough and meet them where they are and make it so simple for them to do their job effectively without burdening them with all the change management efforts, and make it frictionless and secured and scalable.
Excellent. So thank you. So this is kind of, now pivoting a little bit to the OLOID, Workday, and SRS journey. So what were and Kiran, for you, continued kind of, what were the most pressing problems with a previous time tracking system before we kind of implemented OLOID?
Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges we faced was fragmented time collection systems. We had multiple ways where people can clock in time, and of course, they're all coming into Workday, but the interface in the front was all different. And we have different verticals. I mentioned about landscape, pool, and building products, and each vertical had different locations with different devices and methods of tracking time, which all made it really difficult for us to standardize the process, ensure consistent data across the organization, and compound that pain with, now I have payroll team that's dealing with all these inefficiencies and manual tracking, manual edits, and that causes the payroll teams a lot of stress in the back end. And that made it harder for both the HR and operations team to enforce any policies uniformly. And operational processes are also varied, and they're complex and risky from legal standpoint. So, and in some cases, do I even dare to say that we had some manual time tracking practices which are prone to errors, and that require a significant effort to correct them and ensure payroll is processed accurately.
Yeah. So thank you. So fragmentation, and then that leading to additional burden, not just on the frontline workers, but also more so on the payroll side. Yeah, makes total sense. So, and then another thing that we want to touch upon is, California compliance. That was also a big factor in your decision. So, can you just kind of, shed some light on that? And what would the risk if you would not have kind of upgraded or updated?
Yeah, well, time clocks, if you have them in the United States, no conversation is complete without California compliance, right? The fun topic everyone loves to talk about. So, yeah, California compliance definitely was a major factor in our decision. The risk we were trying to mitigate, they were centered around the wage and hour regulations, which are strictly to deal with their meal breaks, the rest breaks, and the time punches and the audit trails. All of these are very critical. And when you're dealing with all the problems that I mentioned, it leads to penalties and legal exposure. And that's not something that we could afford. So with our previous setup of fragmented time collections, it was really hard. And we needed a solution that could support real-time visibility for our employees, know when they clocked in, when the time needs to be corrected and whatnot. And we talked about drivers who are mobile, and they needed mobile access. And we could have a helper that's driving with a driver that needs shared device access. And we also needed some automated alerts for any missed breaks and overtime thresholds and whatnot. So by moving to a unified, more mobile-friendly platform, we have been able to reduce all these headaches and improve our, more importantly, compliance confidence and give our HR and ops teams better tools to manage our risk proactively rather than reactively in our past lives.
Yeah, thank you. And I know every organization, especially leadership, loves the proactive measurement to be able to deal with things. And I love the word compliance confidence. So OLOID help with compliance confidence. Thank you for giving me that word. And you have given many like that in past, so I'm already kind of grateful for that. And Andrew, so are these challenges like we just talked about? We specifically refer to California compliance. Are they unique to California, or do you as Workday see similar patterns across states, regions, countries, and maybe like industries?
I think everyone that's done wage and hour work in California would probably say that it's unique, but it's not unusual. So when we look at helping customers maintain compliance across the US and across the globe, we're constantly looking at the regulatory updates and making sure that we offer a product that is flexible enough to meet your business needs. One thing in the wage and hour world, you may have a baseline for statutory compliance, but that might not be exactly what your company chooses to do. Right? So you may have the minimum, but your company may pay more than the minimum. Or you may want to have a lowest common denominator approach across different locations. And so beyond just the meal and break attestations and the the other pieces that are specific to California, we're also doing a lot of work with Fair Work Week and good faith estimate legislation. So if you change a schedule with less than 7 days notice, you need to pay a 1 to 2 hour penalty, depending on the jurisdiction. Whether you're Philadelphia, whether you're Chicago, California, Oregon, we've got a framework that will actually show on our scheduling product the manager that penalty. And if you make the change before you publish, you would see that wage and hour notice. You would see that you're about to issue a change that's going to have a penalty. And then if you accept it, you maybe don't have a choice. You need to cover the shift. Then that will just feed automatically to payroll and handle it for you. The legislative updates never stop, right? Twice a year, right? A lot of times you're having to keep up with it. And we've also done a lot of investment in our global library where we'll have some pre-configurations published so you can have some of those statutory plans out there, at least as a starting point, so you don't have to go from scratch, and then you can uptake those overall. It's something where compliance is both something you have to do, but also when you put it in the hands of your frontline supervisor, for me as a labor and employment lawyer, that's the scariest thing in the world. Right, that frontline supervisor responsible for statutory penalties and potential class action litigation because they didn't do something like minimum rest or maximum working time durations, something that the tool shouldn't allow you to violate. And that's why we've got a lot of those hard constraints that we've put into the product so that when you actually do the scheduling work, we're kind of taking care of both the soft and hard warnings for you to make it easier for you to operate. But also, like at the end of the day, and I think, SRS would probably attest to this as well. No one actually wants to do time and scheduling administration, right? That's something the managers, the workers have to do to be paid accurately and compliantly, but it's not where they want to choose to spend their time. So we put a lot into like get in, get out, be confident in the results, and then go on about the things that are actually driving value for business.
Yeah, sounds so, just relevant and familiar. I now, as SRS and Workday, we were all working together. So as you mentioned, covering those for all those scenarios where the managers or supervisors didn't really have to come in and do any, say intermediary work, or whether it is even in payroll in the back end, right? So a lot of our work and integration was about just, hey, take away that kind of pain from the frontline workers as well as supervisors, right? So I think that sounds very familiar. And I liked what you mentioned about the fair wages and kind of making it like holistic from the wellness of those employees, right? Financial wellness and their understanding. So love that kind of integration in the plan. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. So back to you, Kiran. So what was the tipping point? You knew that it was coming. So what made you say, I want others to hear, I know. What made you say, we need a change and now?
I'm gonna let you a little secret. So I started leading the payroll team, what is it, almost about a year ago. And when I'm looking at it from the compliance standpoint, the time compliance was an eye opener for me. The amount of time this team is putting in was completely unacceptable for me. And we had to start somewhere. Andrew shared some great things about all these different regulations across different jurisdictions, and we had to start somewhere. And California was it. And we did not want to burden our workforce also with all this change management and humongous learning curve and not go full tech. So last rising is when we were exploring, we got to do something about this one. Let's look at different tools, and ran into OLOID. And then we were like, okay, what are the things that are going to help us address with the California compliance? And we can standardize all our time collection devices, makes it easy for our employees, not burden your leaders also, because every time an employee misses the punch, guess what? Goes back to the manager, and the compliance sits back with the manager. And I talked about entrepreneurial culture. That means that each location has their own P&L. They are held responsible for that P&L. So all of this we're attributing to, we got to do something about it, and more selfishly for my payroll team, make their lives better, and also all our employees' lives better, right? And pay them fairly and according to the regulation. So that was the urgency, especially California compliance looming. And we said we need to fix this now.
Great, thank you. Compliance generally leads to an urgency, right? So Andrew, you are in a great role, right? So you get a lot of urgent customers' needs. So
always happy to help. Yeah.
yeah, so that's why this is a great team. Like, I love working with you both. And Kiran, so once you knew the change was needed, and you kind of a little bit touched upon it, but then how did you go about your vendor evaluation process? And what were some just non-negotiables you had? Okay, we got to have this, and without this vendor is not going to make the list.
Yeah, those that are in the tech world, they understand this. There's always your list of HR initiatives, and there's always competing priorities. And the new AI world of, Gen AI one day, agentic the other day, and, something else the other day, that's making our learning curve shorter and shorter every day. And there is a lot of pressure to deliver. So setting that aside, we had to prioritize and say that as an organization, this is our priority. And that started with aligning with our HR leadership team and our payroll team and our ops team to define what success looked like. And we weren't looking for a time tracking tool. We needed a solution that could scale, support compliance, and work seamlessly for our frontline workers. For us, the non-negotiables were very clear. Mobile first for the frontline employees, a shared device where multiple employees, even if they're mobile, they can use it. California compliance, of course, was on the top of my list, and along with the meal break, rest breaks, audit trails, and whatnot. And integration with Workday, of course, which is our core HR system. That's very important for us. And real-time visibility for employees and managers and the ops teams. So as soon as the time clock happens, do I see that as an employee and the manager and the operations team? Most importantly, ease of use. We can't put all these bells and whistles for just logging in and make it really hard. So because of that, if it's not intuitive, it's not going to be adopted. And, adoption will suffer big time. So we want it very simple, easy for employees to log in and not have to deal with login problems day in, day out, and a solution that works for them.
Yeah. And I come to, one of my favorite questions is that why did OLOID rise to the top? Workday is already there, right? And so OLOID came in. So what sealed the decision for you with OLOID?
So I'll share a funny story with you, and then I'll get to the answer.
Okay.
You know,
I love
one of
funny
our
stories.
one of our IT leaders challenged me with, "Hey, can we make it as simple as employee entering their employee ID?" And I am scratching my head with, it's like that works from IT standpoint, makes the login easy, but how do I make sure, you know, it is the right person logging in at that time and make it all secured and give the confidence to the HR side and the compliance and whatnot, right? So let's start with that. And OLOID had a very simplified login experience, which removed the major barrier for adoption. And especially for our mobile and frontline workforce, we also had the ability to have multiple users log in using a mobile device. That was another huge win for our distributed locations. You know, we go to customer sites all the time and multiple people in the same truck, right? And OLOID also offered seamless integration with Workday, which, like I said, it was non-negotiable for us. So combined with its mobile-first workflows, scalable architecture, and intuitive design, it made it easy for our employees to clock in and manage time directly on their phones and tablets. We also use tablets. The impact was immediate, and it was accurate and compliant with our payroll records. Our adoption rates are super high. We're tracking the numbers on how many time corrections we did before to how many time corrections we do now, how many manual forms we get for attestation before to what do we get, how many do we get now. It tells a story, and it's has significantly improved the employee experience across multiple locations. And it truly helped us turn the operational complexity into a win.
Thanks for sharing that. I don't think that particular example, the story that you said, hey, just make it as simple as employee ID. I think that story was not shared, but I know that the requirement was shared that can we just have employee ID from Workday and just have like seamless experience. So so that I think like now I know where that was coming from. And you were also kind of one of the I think they were one of the first organizations, in fact, like across our time clock, where we had such a massive scale of, say, distributed like mobile employees carrying their phones and right. And that was amazing to kind of have the similar experience, right? You have iPads and iPhones, and then just kind of have same experience. So thanks for pushing for that very strong and consistent experience too. And then seamlessly integrating with Workday in the back end. So all for our frontline workers. So this kind of, you have the biggest, but then it all started with a simple goal. Keep it simple, right? So yeah, let's get to a little bit of kind of, we talked about vendor research, we talked about why OLOID, and now kind of, just I love execution, and I know that how much do you love, Kiran. And once you selected, what did rollout look like? What worked well? What needed to be adjusted?
Yeah, we did our vendor evaluations and we did our reference checks and all of that. We feel like we finally made the decision, but I still needed to go through the phase to make sure the tool is still a fit, right? Just because we did our evaluation, we wanted to do a full-blown discovery because when you don't have that kind of time, you go through the high-level assessment, and then we wanted to make sure the tools fit as it was during the sales cycle. So we went through what I'm going to call it as a discovery phase to align our goals, understand the nuances, because our business has our own nuances and our different workforce and the locations and whatnot. So we wanted to bring all of that together, conduct a discovery phase, and followed by that, we had requirements and build phase, like typical any other project where we work closely with the OLOID team to tailor the solution to our needs, and more specifically around the mobile clock-ins in the California compliance. Okay. Next, we didn't want to go big bang. We have about 100 plus locations altogether. I still wanted to. Sitting at a corporate, it's easy to make decisions, but may not be the right decisions, right? I wanted to test the waters, so we picked 3 most tech-friendly branches that had smaller to larger population, yet open to change, and we piloted it for them. And they got this fantastic feedback, and they helped us fine-tune all the workflows. And once we validated this experience and the performance, we moved into full deployment across all the 100 locations in California. And what really worked well was the collaboration between the teams, whether it is OLOID, we call ourselves Field Support Center, not corporate, so it sounds bureaucratic. And the mobile-first design and the ease of integration with Workday. What we needed some adjustment and ensuring device readiness, that was a little bit of a challenge. And connectivity in certain sites, hardware, internet, we're not into high-tech business, we're into product distribution. And we had to provide that extra training for the teams who are less familiar with the technology and, make sure they're ready for the launch.
Thank you. Andrew, I was coming to you too. So I think because, this is a three-way kind of work that happened as Kiran mentioned, collaboration was the most important. We are bringing like three big pieces together via a customer. So I think what was kind of your partnership with Workday like, and then what were certain things that you were addressing together for this integration to work?
I think in the partnership program with Workday, we spend a lot of time with our vendors, making sure that they're onboarded, they understand how our access endpoints work, what they might need to do to make sure that they get the right amount of data in, that they feed it back in a performant manner, right? So you don't overwhelm the API servers. And so, with OLOID going through that process, I think they learned a lot about our endpoints and then came up with a API and full integration that feeds in the information, but also only takes out the kind of minimum required information into the downstream system, so that you don't, have two copies of all of the worker data in two places, but really only the information that's actually needed to perform the role. So that also kind of manages your risk profile across your integrations and your data structures, and then making sure that when we feed it back, that it's being fed in the right way to do all of the calculations. And our time calculation engine is very powerful, but that's how you get the compliant result, right? You feed it in the correct way, you get the right visibility for the workers and managers, and then they can own the P&L for their individual locations and see when the data comes back in, what they're spending in real time. So as those time punches roll in on the kiosks from OLOID, you actually know what the shift is costing you, and then you can take proactive adjustments. Let's say you were expecting a shipment to come in, it's delayed, and you can short shift the team and send them home because you're not actually going to need that much labor during that day. And you can make intra-day changes rather than waiting until the end of the month and then going through a long reconciliation process and realizing that you overspent on your labor cost.
Okay. Wonderful. I think you both gave very actionable insights and into the integration. So Andrew, just another question to you. So how do you see OLOID? You kind of mentioned a little bit of that already, in your response, but how do you see OLOID fitting into this Workday's broader vision for frontline workers? You did mention partnership and then other things that were happening, but where do we fit together, right, into the frontline workers management broader vision strategy?
So, frontline workers have different ways that they need and want to access the information. Workday doesn't produce any physical hardware. We're not in the hardware business. That's a whole different, as you know, right? When you're doing physical goods, returning and maintenance and service, that's something that we don't do, and we intentionally don't do it because that's something that our partners excel in. And you want us spending our money and our intellectual property investments on making the core products better so that they're better for you. And then the innovation and the time capture space is something that our partners are leading the way in. So you actually end up getting the best of both, right? If we focus on our specialties and work together, that's something where we have a great symbiotic relationship for that. So that, yes, we do have a mobile app. Yes, you can clock time on desktop. But in the frontline space, particular where you're doing high volume time entry, where you want biometric security for login, where you want to manage things like BIPA in Illinois for the biometric information protection, that's something that OLOID is doing. and it's something that fills the space for us where Workday has chosen not to go into that space so that the customers get what they need in the right mixture of time capture, but also like SRS did, you can standardize and rely on those roadmap investments and then give the best experience to your frontline workers, but also take care of the managers on the back end when they're viewing that in a unified system with the pay and the performance and the other data that they might want to view on some of their aggregate dashboards and reporting.
Thank you. 1 + 1 is equal to 11, right? And then we collectively kind of help our customer get 10x. That becomes 110. Like, yeah, wow. So this is thank you for that thank you for that collective, speaking for OLOID and then how we can collectively help customers like SRS. So kind of getting back to you, one of the interesting parts of your rollout, and then you already touched upon, right, the mobile kiosk for remote clock-ins. So how did it change the shift behavior, right? The shift employee, as I said in the beginning, hey, they gave these numbers for retail and then mobile healthcare about how many times they're clocking in, how much time they spend just in every shift and number of clicks that they use. So kind of trying to address that question. So how did this mobile kiosk help with this shift employee behavior and their experience?
Yeah, so with the mobile kiosk, now there is a gadget in their tool that will also allow time entry for them, right? And it also supports all the compliance regulations. So, and they don't have to remember the password. Multi-factor authentication exists, but still it is not as intensive. And it can be shared. It's not a device that's tied to me. It can be shared, right? And I can also see my weekly time that I entered. So all of them in one location, that has shifted the whole game for them. And it's basically, I have the device, I'm expected to clock in, and I also am responsible for making sure it's also easy for me to log in, and I'm trained, and it's shared across, and I can view my time, so I can immediately get it corrected if there is a need. So that's what changed things for them.
I remember one of the examples like you had mentioned during the implementation was that, hey, because these trucks are kind of parked outside, and thanks for giving me opportunity to visit one of such sites. And then I had an opportunity to speak to those drivers as the supervisors. So the fact that what you mentioned that now drivers don't, even if they have to rush from one site to another, they can just see that schedule from their truck, right? And then they don't really need to go inside and tell the manager and clock in. And there were times where they have to move their truck just because another truck driver came and they have to kind of, move or somebody else came from outside. So all these just normal day jobs were requiring them to come in and out and move their trucks. And all that time is not where organization or them want to be spending. They want to be just delivering their product. And with this mobile kiosk in their trucks, that has made it easier for them, right? And then managers don't have to worry that, okay, I have to kind of, edit their time because they're just moving their truck from one location to another within the building instead of delivering. So I still remember those kind of, nuggets. And as you're saying that this has really helped them, right? So to kind of just focus on just time clocking in and delivering the product. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The SIP wasn't just operational, it was more cultural, by empowering our teams with the tools that actually work for them.
Yeah.
I've got a question on change management. So this is the thing that typically torpedoes any good rollout, right? Is the challenges with change management and adoption as you go. So you were rolling out new systems to frontline workers across SRS. How did you actually work to encourage the adoption? I know you went with maybe a piloted group that were more tech-centric, but what did that rollout look like, and what are some pro tips you might have to other members of the audience on how they might replicate your success in getting adoption in the front line?
That's a really good question, Andrew. So from adoption standpoint, let me give you a little bit of my perspective. You know, so 70% of our workforce is Frontline. They are, like I said, they are the core for our success and growth. Gone the days where you can have the expensive hardware, long implementation timelines, and whatnot. So we had to take the approach of understanding things from their lens, like Lakshmi was talking to the frontline workers and the leaders that manage them, boots on the ground, and building training material, like, you know, even smaller things like we have a significant Spanish-speaking population. So making the training available in both environments, making the tool available in both environments, I mean, both languages, both English and Spanish. So small things like that, which you don't naturally think about them, like English is the business language, let me push it, right? From that to thinking about the smallest pieces where why they're saying, what is the problem we're trying to solve for, without having the lens of I'm corporate or whatever we call ourselves, and roll out a system for the sake of rolling out the system. That mindset is we are here to serve them was the key for the adoption strategy.
That's a great connection to the workers, putting things in a format that are easily digestible, but also something as basic as putting it in the language that the worker operates in so that they will consume and adopt the change management materials. You know, even something as kind of setting their worker profile by default. So if they have a preferred language, we can feed that through, and, you know, OLOID picks it up and displays the language on the clock terminals, you know, in Spanish or English, depending on the preference. That's a great connection strategy, and something that I think if you're listening and you're on here and you're thinking about rolling out, if you're not already thinking about change management, start now. Because that will be the thing that takes the longest and is most required for your success down